Have you ever found yourself in a moment where everything you've built starts to unravel in front of your eyes? The very essence of who you are, your words, your values, becomes the target of attack, and the pressure of it all weighs down like an unrelenting storm. Blake Shelton, a country music legend, faced this very moment live on national television. What should have been an ordinary promotion for his new album quickly turned into a high-stakes battle, where respect, integrity, and authenticity hung in the balance. Picture this. It's a sunny morning. The cameras are rolling, the studio lights are blinding, and Blake Shelton is sitting across from Michael Strahan, ready for what he believes to be a typical celebrity interview. But the moment the conversation begins, something shifts. Strahan asks a seemingly innocent question about country music, but underneath the surface there's a tension that's about to boil over. Blake's words, once innocent, once passionate, are suddenly twisted into something they're not. A simple conversation about music becomes an emotional test that neither of them were prepared for. So, how did we get here? How did a friendly chat spiral into a confrontation that would have the world watching? It all started with one question, one misstep that set the stage for everything that would follow. Blake could feel it. This wasn't just an interview. This was the beginning of something that would define him in a way that no one could predict. The cameras were rolling and the storm was coming. Everything seemed normal. The familiar set of Good Morning America, the warm lights, the enthusiastic audience, and a guest who had graced the stage countless times. Blake Shelton sat in the guest chair, his usual easygoing smile in place, ready to talk about his new album, his life, and his music. Michael Strahan, the charismatic host, had a rapport with Blake, and the conversation was supposed to flow effortlessly. After all, this was just another promotional segment. Or so Blake thought. As Strahan shuffled his notes, the familiar pre-interview small talk began. "Good morning, Blake. Thanks for joining us today. I know your fans are excited about the new album. Let's talk about that," he said, his grin wide, his tone warm. Blake's response was smooth, genuine. "Thanks for having me, Michael. It's always a pleasure to be here." But then, Strahan's voice shifted ever so slightly. He leaned forward just a little too much, his tone a bit more measured. Blake's heart skipped a beat. He'd been in these interviews before. He knew when something was coming. "And before we get into the music, I've got to ask you about something that's been making headlines. There's been some talk about your recent comments about the current state of country music." Blake blinked, his smile faltering for just a moment. A slight shift in tone, a pivot from the comfortable, well-worn path of celebrity interviews to something far more charged. Strahan didn't just want to talk about the album. He wanted to talk about what Blake had said. "Some people weren't too happy about what you had to say," Strahan continued. His words precise, almost cutting. Blake's chest tightened. He knew exactly what Strahan was referring to, and he wasn't ready for this. The studio lights that once felt warm now seemed too bright, the air around him too thick. He'd spoken about the authenticity of country music, something he felt deeply about. But in that moment he realized the conversation was no longer about music. It was about his character, his values, his place in a changing industry. Blake adjusted his position in the chair, his smile now gone. He could feel the sweat on his palms. The storm was coming, and he hadn't even seen the first wave yet. Blake's stomach churned as Strahan's question lingered in the air, a weight that had suddenly replaced the lightness of the conversation. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was personal. It was about the perception of who Blake was, the kind of artist he had become, and the storm of controversy swirling around him. "Well, Michael, I think there might be some misunderstanding about what I actually said," Blake began, trying to keep his voice steady, but there was an edge to it now. The calm, easygoing Blake Shelton was slipping away. The reality was, he hadn't anticipated this. He hadn't prepared for the words to be twisted, for the things he had said to be used against him. Strahan didn't back down. "Oh, really?" His voice was sharp now, a little more cutting, like he was daring Blake to defend himself. "The quote I have here says, 'You think modern country music has lost its soul, and that most of the new artists wouldn't know real country if it bit them in the behind.'" The studio fell silent. Every eye was on Blake, every camera capturing the moment. Blake's jaw tightened. He could feel his blood rising, his frustration building. The pressure to respond, to clarify, to make his point heard, was suffocating. This wasn't just about explaining himself anymore. It was about standing his ground, protecting the integrity of his words, his career, and the passion he had for his music. "You know what, Michael? That's not what I meant." Blake's voice grew firmer, but there was a crack of frustration, too. What I was talking about was the authenticity of the music, the soul of it. Not attacking anyone personally. There's a difference between standing up for the music and disrespecting artists. But it seems like you're deliberately twisting my words to make a point that's not mine. Strahan's eyes narrowed slightly, the playful grin replaced by something colder, more calculated. "I'm not twisting anything, Blake. I'm just reading what you said. And honestly, if you don't want people to interpret your words that way, maybe you should choose them more carefully." Blake's eyes widened with disbelief, the audacity of it. He'd been in this industry long enough to know how powerful words could be, how they could be distorted and misused. But he also knew this was more than just words. This was an attack on his reputation, on his principles. Blake leaned forward, his voice thickening with emotion. "You think I haven't been careful with my words? You think I'm just throwing them out there without meaning? I've been in this business for over 20 years, and I've earned the right to speak my mind. You don't get to take my words and turn them into something else to make this interview more sensational." Strahan, ever the professional, didn't flinch. But there was a glint in his eyes now, an almost dangerous amusement as he met Blake's glare. "You want to talk about respect, Blake? Maybe you should show a little more of it for the younger generation of country artists." The moment had shifted completely. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was a battle. Words were now weapons, and each one fired was meant to wound the other. But who would come out on top? Blake could feel his pulse quicken, his grip tightening on the arms of the chair as Strahan's words sank in. It wasn't just about the music now. It was about his place in this ever-changing industry. And Blake wasn't backing down, not now, not when everything he stood for was under attack. He took a deep breath, his country drawl thickening as he fought to keep his composure. "You want to talk about respect, Michael?" Blake's voice dropped an octave, becoming low and deliberate. "What I was saying was about the authenticity of the music, not about tearing down the people making it. And if you're going to sit there and twist my words like that, then maybe you should take a step back and understand the difference between being a critic and being a journalist." The tension in the room was rising like a storm cloud gathering force. Strahan's smile wavered just slightly, but he was resolute. "Well, it seems pretty straightforward to me, Blake. You're saying that these new artists don't know anything about real country. You're essentially telling them they don't measure up." Blake's heart pounded. This wasn't the conversation he had prepared for. He had come to Good Morning America to talk about his album, his music, his journey. But instead, he was defending his very existence in the industry. "This isn't about the new artists. Michael," Blake said, his voice rising with the frustration that had been building for what felt like an eternity. "It's about the soul of country music. What I've been trying to say is that the industry is changing, and I'm not going to sit by and watch it lose the very thing that made it special in the first place." Strahan pressed on, not relenting. "But that's the problem, Blake. You're saying that these younger artists are out of touch. You're saying they're not good enough, not real enough for your standards. And I'm sorry, but that doesn't sound like respect. It sounds like you're fighting a battle against the future." The words stung, and Blake felt them deep inside. He wasn't just fighting a battle for authenticity anymore. He was fighting a battle for the future of the genre he loved. But Strahan's challenge was something else. It was a challenge to his very place in the conversation. Blake leaned forward, locking eyes with Strahan. "I've never said they're not good enough. But I'm not going to stand by and let the soul of country music get watered down just to make it more commercial or palatable for the masses. That's not what I signed up for. And if that's a battle against the future, then fine. But I'm fighting for the heart of the genre, and that's something worth fighting for." Strahan was quiet for a moment, as if processing Blake's words. But the silence didn't last. It was replaced by a calm, almost mocking response. "Isn't it interesting, Blake, how the soul of country music is so subjective. What's real to you might not be the same thing for everyone else. You've built your career on this idea of authenticity, but maybe you're just scared of change. Maybe you're afraid of what comes next, afraid that your version of country music won't be enough to keep you relevant. Blake's expression darkened. The room was thick with tension now, the cameras capturing every word, every subtle movement. He could feel the eyes of millions on him, watching, waiting for him to crack. But Blake wasn't going to crack. Not now. Not with everything on the line. "I'm not afraid of change," Blake said, his voice dangerously low. "What I'm afraid of is losing what made country music real in the first place. And if that makes me the villain in this story, then so be it. But I won't back down from fighting for what I believe in." The room seemed to hold its breath. The battle between them wasn't just about music. It was about two men, two ideologies, two definitions of what it meant to be real, to be authentic, and to hold on to something sacred. Blake knew that this moment, this conversation, was bigger than him. It wasn't just about an album or a promotion. It was about the future of country music, and how far he was willing to go to protect it. But Strahan wasn't finished yet. Blake's eyes narrowed as Strahan's words cut through the air. There was no going back now. The gloves were off, and the lines between respect and disrespect had blurred beyond recognition. Blake could feel the rawness of the situation. His passion for country music had become a battleground, and Strahan was relentless in his pursuit to provoke. "You know what, Michael," Blake said, his voice low, his hands clenched tightly around the armrests. "You're talking about relevance like it's something I'm fighting for. But that's not it. I'm fighting for something bigger. I'm fighting for the authenticity of a genre I've dedicated my life to." Strahan leaned in, his expression hardening. "You're fighting for authenticity?" He scoffed. "Is that what you think this is? What do you know about authenticity when you've spent half your career on TV, smiling for the cameras, dating pop stars, and making appearances at every award show known to man? Maybe you're more concerned about staying relevant than you're letting on." Blake stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with a jarring noise that echoed in the studio. The room seemed to shrink around him, the air thick with the intensity of the moment. He felt the anger rising, but more than that, he felt betrayed by the misrepresentation of who he was and what he stood for. "Excuse me?" Blake snapped, his voice loud enough to make Strahan lean back slightly. The tension was palpable. "You think you know me? You think you can take a cheap shot at my career, my music, my life, just to get a reaction for your show? I've worked harder than you'll ever know to build my career, and if you think that's just about staying relevant, then you've got it all wrong. This is about more than that, Michael. It's about the soul of country music. You wouldn't understand that." The words hit Strahan like a punch, but he didn't flinch. Instead, his lips curled into a smirk. "You think I don't understand? You've got your little niche, Blake, and you're trying to hold on to it for dear life. But this is bigger than you. This is about the future of the genre. And the future isn't about staying stuck in the past, no matter how hard you fight against it." Blake could feel his chest tightening, the heat of frustration blurring his vision. "You really think this is about the future?" Blake's voice rose with each word. "The future of country music isn't about pretending to be something you're not. It's about authenticity. It's about the real stories, the real struggles, the heart of what country music was built on. And if you can't see that, then maybe you're the one who's stuck in the past." For a split second, the room fell into an almost eerie silence. The battle was far from over, but it felt like they were both standing on the edge of a precipice, the final words about to come crashing down. But Strahan wasn't done yet. His eyes locked onto Blake, filled with a sharp intensity that matched Blake's own fury. "I'm not stuck in the past, Blake. You are. You're clinging to this idea of authenticity, like it's some sacred thing, and all the while, the world is moving on. The world doesn't care about your nostalgia. It cares about what's real now." Blake took a step forward, his voice suddenly quiet but seething with underlying rage. "What's real? You want to know what's real, Michael? Real is having the courage to stand up for something bigger than yourself. Real is having the strength to fight for your beliefs, even when it's not popular, even when everyone's telling you to let go. Strahan raised an eyebrow, his lips curling into a knowing smirk. "And here you are trying to tell me what's real. You're an aging country star, holding on to past glory, and you're trying to tell me about what's real." Blake took another step forward, his hands clenched at his sides, his voice rising with each word. "I'm not the one living in the past. You want to talk about relevance? Well, I'm not the one here twisting my words for ratings. I'm not the one trying to turn this into a circus just to create a viral moment." Blake was shaking with anger now, his body tense with the rawness of the moment. "You're the one who crossed the line, Michael. You're the one who made this personal. And you think that's real? You think you can break someone down just for the sake of your show? You think this is about authenticity? No, it's not. This is about you trying to create a narrative that suits you. And that's the real problem here." Blake's chest heaved with frustration, his pulse pounding in his ears. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a personal attack, one that went beyond music, beyond his career. Strahan had made it clear. This was a battle of egos, and Blake was fighting not just for his reputation but for his identity. "You think I'm pretending, Michael?" Blake's voice was a low growl. "You think I'm some has-been hanging on to a past I can't let go of? You have no idea what it's like to put everything you have into something and then have it questioned by someone like you." Strahan leaned back, his face betraying a mix of amusement and irritation. "Has-been? You're the one stuck on a pedestal, acting like you're the last real country artist left. Let's talk about your so-called authenticity. You've made your living off of a narrative. Country music, beer, trucks, and God knows what else. But when it comes down to it, you're just another celebrity with a gimmick." Blake's jaw tightened. The words cut deeper than he cared to admit. But he wasn't going to let Strahan see it. "Not now. You really want to talk about gimmicks?" Blake stepped closer to the desk, his presence towering, his voice steady but seething with intensity. "I'm not the one using my past to sell a story. I've lived the life I sing about. Every song, every lyric, it's my truth. Not some manufactured image I've created for the camera. So yeah, maybe I've built a career on authenticity, and maybe you're right about one thing that is something I'll never apologize for." The studio was quiet, but the tension was palpable. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath. No one knew how this was going to end, but it was clear that whatever happened next, it wasn't going to be pretty. Strahan's smile faded, and his tone shifted. "You're so caught up in your own authenticity, Blake, that you can't see the bigger picture. You can't see that country music is evolving. You're stuck in a moment that no longer exists. And that's why your music is fading." Blake's eyes flashed with a fire that no one had seen before. His voice rose, a mixture of anger and disbelief. "My music is fading? You want to talk about fading? Let's talk about your career for a second. You think the world still cares about your football glory days or your time on TV? That's cute. But newsflash, Michael, real stars don't fade. They keep going, no matter what the critics say." Strahan's eyes narrowed as the words hit home. The harsh reality of being reduced to his football career and the shadow of his TV persona stung more than he cared to admit. But he wasn't about to back down either. "Is that what you think? That I'm living in the shadow of something that's long gone?" Strahan stood up from his chair, the tension in his voice matching Blake's. "Maybe you're right. Maybe you've sold more records than I'll ever see. But that doesn't mean you get to dictate what's real and what's not. You've built your empire on your version of country music. But there's more to this world than just your limited view of it." Blake took a step forward, his fists clenched, his country accent thickening with every word. "You've crossed a line, Michael. You think I'm limited? You think I'm holding on to something that doesn't matter anymore? You have no idea what it's like to give your whole heart to something and have it attacked by someone who doesn't understand it. But you'll learn. The truth always comes out." Strahan leaned over the desk, their faces inches apart now, the heat of their words filling the room. "You think the truth is what you're saying? The truth is you're fighting a losing battle. The world is moving on, and you're still holding on to a dream that's already dead." Blake's face reddened, his hands shaking with fury. "You want to talk about dreams? Let me tell you something about dreams, Michael. They don't die unless you let them. And I'm not letting go of my not now, not ever. You can take your opinions and your twisted narrative and shove it. I know who I am, and I'm not afraid to stand up for what I believe in." The silence between them stretched as thick as the tension in the air. This wasn't just a conversation anymore, it was a showdown, and neither man was willing to back down. The room felt suffocating now. Blake's chest was tight with emotion, anger, frustration, and the deep, unrelenting need to defend everything he had worked for. Strahan's words had hit home, but Blake wasn't going to let him control the narrative. He had been fighting for authenticity his entire career, and now, with everything on the line, he wasn't about to let anyone twist his truth. "Is that how you see it?" Blake's voice was low, almost menacing. "That I'm stuck in the past? That I'm some washed-up has-been who doesn't know when to quit? You've got it all wrong, Michael. I'm not afraid of change. I'm afraid of losing what made country music real. And that's something you'll never understand, no matter how hard you try." Strahan stood firm, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a glimmer of doubt, or perhaps something more. "You really think you're the last one who understands what country music is all about? You think you're the only one who gets it? You're not the only one with a voice, Blake. And if you think you are, then you're just as blinded as you accuse everyone else of being." Blake's face flushed, the anger boiling inside him like a pressure cooker ready to explode. "Blinded? Blinded? I'm the one who's been out there, living it, touring the country, writing the songs, giving everything I have to this genre. You're the one sitting behind a desk, twisting my words and turning this into something it's not. Who's blinded now?" The tension in the room had reached a breaking point. The cameras, the crew, the audience, they were all witnesses to this unraveling moment, a collision of two egos that neither would concede. And yet, for all the fire in Blake's words, Strahan didn't back down. In fact, his calm demeanor seemed to fuel the fire even more. "You know what, Blake?" Strahan's voice was calm, but there was a biting sharpness to it. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I don't understand country music the way you do, but I understand something you're clearly missing. The world moves on. The music, the industry, the people, they all evolve. And the sooner you realize that, the sooner you'll stop fighting a battle you can't win." Blake's lips curled into a bitter smile. "The world moves on, huh? You think everything's about moving forward, about evolving to fit some new narrative that doesn't respect the roots of what came before? That's exactly what's wrong with this whole conversation. The world doesn't have to forget where it came from just to move forward. You can't throw away everything that's real just to make room for what's trending." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Strahan's face flushed with a mixture of frustration and disbelief. The insults were flying now, each one a sharp jab aimed at the other's character, their very identity. But it wasn't just about who could throw the hardest punch, it was about who could survive the emotional battlefield. Strahan's voice dropped, his composure finally cracking. "So you're telling me that I should just bow down to your version of what's real, Blake? Just sit here and listen to you lecture me on authenticity like you've got the market cornered? Is that it?" Blake stepped forward, his presence overwhelming as he looked Strahan dead in the eyes. "No, Michael. What I'm telling you is that you don't get to define what's real for me. You don't get to twist my words, manipulate my truth, and then act like you're the one on the side of what's right. I've earned my place in this industry. I've earned every damn thing I've got, and I'm not letting anyone take that from me." Strahan didn't back down, but something shifted. The anger in his eyes mirrored Blake's, the tension between them almost unbearable. The air in the room was electric with the intensity of their words, each one charged with years of unspoken resentment, pride, and defiance. And as the two men stood inches apart, their words filling the space between them, it became clear. This wasn't just about country music anymore. This was about something far deeper. It was about respect, identity, and the fight to hold on to what mattered most. Blake and Strahan were locked in a battle of pride and authenticity. Strahan challenged Blake's views on the future of country music, calling him stuck in the past. Blake shot back, defending the genre's soul, refusing to let it become diluted for mainstream appeal. As their heated exchange escalated, Strahan pushed Blake's buttons, accusing him of clinging to outdated ideals. Blake, firm in his beliefs, retorted that authenticity couldn't be sacrificed for trends. The verbal war grew more intense, both men unwilling to back down. With one last defiant statement, Blake walked off set, leaving Strahan to process the aftermath of a clash that would go down in television history. Blake, storming off the set, left behind a tense and silent studio. His departure left Strahan standing alone, trying to grasp what had just transpired. For Blake, the confrontation was a moment of vindication, a battle fought for his principles. Strahan, on the other hand, felt the weight of crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The fight wasn't just over music, it was a clash of identities, values, and pride. Both men knew that nothing would be the same after this moment. The world would watch as their egos and beliefs clashed, but neither could retreat. The viral clip of Blake's walk-off took over social media, sparking debates across the nation. Fans rallied behind Blake, praising his authenticity, while others criticized his reaction. Strahan, too, found himself under scrutiny, questioned for pushing too far. The interview had gone from a music promotion to a discussion about authenticity, leaving both men to contend with the fallout of a confrontation that had transcended the show itself. While their careers would continue, the effects of that moment lingered, sparking conversations on what it means to stay true to one's roots in a world that's constantly changing. The interview left both Blake and Strahan grappling with the consequences of their words. Blake's fans celebrated his stand for authenticity, while critics questioned whether his anger was justified. Strahan, once a calm and collected host, was now a focal point for the debate on journalism versus sensationalism. The interview had opened a larger discussion about country music's evolution and the authenticity of the artists who define it. Both men, though facing criticism, had ignited a conversation about what it means to be real in an industry that's constantly evolving. What do you think? Was Blake justified in his reaction? Did Strahan go too far, or was he just doing his job? The debate continues, and we want to hear from you. Drop your comments below and share your thoughts. If you're passionate about staying true to who you are, hit subscribe for more stories that challenge the status quo. This isn't just about music. It's about the fight for authenticity in a world that's constantly changing.